There's a suspicious black girl in a hoodie. I think she's here to steal." Rachel Monroe's voice was low but sharp as she spoke into the phone. Her eyes never left the 12-year-old girl standing near the front display of the boutique. Her fingers clutched the device tightly, not from fear, but from judgment. Nia Dawson stood just a few feet away, unaware that someone had already decided she did not belong. She was wearing a pastel pink hoodie, slightly oversized, with matching sneakers and neatly styled curly hair that bounced gently as she moved. She looked like any 12-year-old with a plan, determined, excited, and more than a little nervous. What she carried in her pocket wasn't a threat, it was hope. $320, all saved from babysitting, running errands for neighbors, and collecting birthday money over the past 6 months. She hadn't touched a dime of it until today. Today was special. In exactly 5 days, her mother, Vanessa Dawson, would be turning 42. And Nia had found the perfect birthday gift, a dress she'd seen online. Elegant, sea blue, simple but powerful, just like her mom. She had memorized the price, the store, even the layout. Essence Mode Boutique. Nia had never shopped alone before, but this time she wanted the surprise to be hers alone to give. Her mother had spent her entire life making sure Nia never felt less than enough. And now Nia wanted to show her just how much that love had meant. But as soon as she stepped into the boutique, something shifted. Rachel Monroe stood behind the counter, arms crossed, posture rigid. Her beige blazer sat perfectly pressed over a white shirt, her blonde hair tied in a tight ponytail that matched her expression. Tight and cold. She didn't greet Nia. She didn't ask if she needed help. She just watched. Nia took a breath and smiled, walking toward a rack near the window. She tried not to be nervous. She had practiced this. Walk in, find the dress, try it on, buy it. Simple. But Rachel didn't move. Her eyes scanned every step Nia took like a guard dog waiting for a command. When Nia paused to glance at a price tag, Rachel narrowed her gaze. When Nia reached into her hoodie pocket, not to hide anything, but to check the carefully folded bills inside, Rachel reached for the store phone. "Yes, Essence Mode on East Fremont. There's a young black girl here, around 12, in a hoodie. She's acting suspicious. I need someone here right away." Rachel's voice was steady, professional, practiced. Nia still had no idea. She was focused on a nearby rack, hoping the blue dress might still be there. She gently parted the hangers, treating the fabric like it might tear if she breathed too hard. Her mother loved dresses with clean lines and strong colors. And sea blue? That was her favorite. From across the room, Rachel stared, her jaw clenched. She had seen Nia the moment she walked in and already made her decision. Not based on Nia's actions, but on her hoodie, her skin, her age. It didn't matter that Nia had money, that she'd planned this for months. To Rachel, she was just a problem waiting to happen. Outside, the faint wail of sirens began to echo in the distance. The quiet buzz of the boutique, once serene, now felt heavy. Nia hadn't touched anything, hadn't asked for help. But already the assumptions were at work. Already the world had tilted against her. Where are you watching from today? Drop your city or state in the comments. Because in this story, where someone's from shouldn't decide how they're treated. Nia took a step closer to the rack that held the sea blue dress. Her fingers trembled just slightly as she reached out to touch the delicate fabric. The texture was smooth, almost silky, and the gentle shimmer in the lighting made it look like something out of a dream. This was it, the exact dress she had seen online. She checked the price tag again, $310 before tax. She still had enough. Her allowance, the babysitting money, even the $5 bills she had pressed flat under her mattress, it was all right there in her hoodie pocket, folded neatly inside a white envelope. She took one more deep breath and turned toward the front counter where Rachel Monroe was standing with her arms crossed, tapping one finger impatiently against the marble countertop. Nia walked slowly, holding the dress with both hands like it was made of glass. Her voice was soft but steady as she approached. "Excuse me, ma'am. I'd like to try this on, please." Rachel looked up from her phone with the kind of disinterest usually reserved for chewing gum stuck to the bottom of a shoe. Her eyes flicked from Nia's face to the dress, then down to the pink hoodie, pausing just long enough to register disapproval before she spoke. That dress is $310, she said coldly, enunciating every word like she was speaking to someone who didn't understand English. It's delicate, expensive. Are you sure you're in the right section? Nia hesitated, surprised by the question. Yes, ma'am, she replied politely, standing a little straighter. I have the money. I've been saving for it. Slowly, she pulled the envelope from her pocket and placed it gently on the counter. She opened the flap and let the crisp bills show, all counted and stacked. This is for my mom's birthday. I want to surprise her. Rachel didn't look impressed. In fact, her expression darkened. She picked up the envelope, held it up to the light as if inspecting counterfeit bills, then dropped it back on the counter with a sharp thud. Where did you get this money? She demanded. Who gave it to you? Nia blinked, confused. I saved it, she said quietly. I do chores, babysit sometimes, and I got birthday money last month. Uh-huh, Rachel said, her voice thick with disbelief. And I'm supposed to believe that a 12-year-old walks in here with over $300 to buy a designer dress? You expect me to just accept that? Nia didn't know what to say. She'd never been spoken to like this in a store before. She looked around hoping someone else might step in, but the few other shoppers seemed busy with their own browsing, and no one met her eyes. Her shoulders tensed, but she stayed composed. I promise it's my money, she said softly. I just want to try the dress on. That's all. Rachel leaned over the counter, lowering her voice but sharpening the edge of her tone. Listen, sweetie, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but you don't belong in this boutique. We don't let kids play dress up with garments worth more than what most people make in a week. Take your little envelope and go find something more suitable. Her smile was fake, tight-lipped, and full of condescension. Clara Nguyen, the young sales associate who had been organizing accessories near the sidewall, froze mid-step. She had heard the entire exchange. Her chest tightened with the familiar sting of helplessness. She had worked under Rachel Monroe for nearly 2 years and had seen this pattern more than once. Rachel never raised her voice, but her message was always loud and clear. Certain people didn't fit the image of Essence Mode. Clara glanced at Nia and felt something twist inside her. The girl's face held a kind of quiet dignity, but Clara could see the hurt forming behind her eyes. Still, Clara stayed where she was. Her job depended on silence. Speaking up against Rachel meant being labeled difficult, and difficult employees didn't last long. Back at the counter, Nia reached again for the envelope, her hand trembling now, but she didn't pick it up. She left it right there. I'm not trying to cause trouble, she said. I just want to get something nice for my mom. In. Rachel shook her head. What's your mother going to do with a dress like this anyway? I doubt she shops here. The words hit like ice water. Nia took a breath and tried to remain steady. Actually, she started, then stopped. She didn't want to give anything away. She didn't want to use her mother's name to buy respect. Not like this. She wanted to do this her way. Rachel cut her off before she could finish. I've had enough. This is a high-end retail space. If you don't leave voluntarily, I will have to take further steps. Her eyes flicked toward the store phone again, though Nia didn't realize she had already made that call 10 minutes earlier. I'm not doing anything wrong, Nia said, her voice beginning to crack. I just wanted to... But before she could finish, the front doors of the boutique opened. The sound of boots echoed off the polished tile floor. A uniformed officer stepped inside, and Nia understood. This wasn't just about a dress anymore. This was about what Rachel Monroe had seen the moment she walked through the door, a young black girl in a hoodie. And in Rachel's world, that had been all she needed to judge. The moment the officer stepped inside the boutique, everything changed. The soft rustle of designer fabric and the quiet hum of air conditioning were drowned out by the sound of authority. Officer Raymond Harris, in full uniform, scanned the store as he adjusted the radio clip to his shoulder. His boots echoed against the polished tile floor with every step, announcing that something serious was about to unfold. Rachel Monroe straightened her posture as if she had just been handed an award. Her voice turned syrupy and performative. Officer, thank you for coming so quickly. This young girl, she gestured toward Nia, has been acting suspiciously. I believe she may have concealed merchandise and was becoming aggressive when questioned. Nia's mouth dropped open. I didn't take anything, she stammered, instinctively stepping back from the counter. Her fingers still hovered near the white envelope full of her money, which remained untouched. She looked at the officer, eyes wide with disbelief. I swear I didn't do anything wrong. I was just trying to buy a dress for my mom's birthday. Officer Harris held up a hand. Miss, I need you to stay calm. Let's talk this through. His voice wasn't harsh, but it carried weight, the kind that made even adults feel like they were back in a school principal's office. Rachel folded her arms, clearly enjoying the spectacle. She refused to leave when I asked, and she's been wandering around the store, touching items without supervision. I saw her put something in her pocket. I didn't put anything in my pocket, Nia cried. Her voice cracked under the pressure, but she still didn't raise her volume. She looked around again, desperately hoping someone, anyone, would step in. But the customers kept their distance. Some stared, others looked away, pretending not to hear. The weight of their silence was crushing. Clara Nguyen was frozen behind a display shelf, heart pounding. She had heard every lie, seen every false accusation. She had even watched Rachel make that phone call long before Nia had approached the counter, but the fear of losing her job kept her rooted to the floor. Her loyalty, up until now, had been quiet, but her guilt was starting to scream. Officer Harris turned back to Nia. Do you have anything in your pockets that you shouldn't? Nia shook her head. Just my phone, and the envelope. You can check. Please, I didn't do anything wrong. She reached into her hoodie slowly and pulled out the envelope, holding it out like it was proof of her innocence. But Rachel was already escalating. She raised her voice at me, she said sharply, and I have reason to believe she might be hiding something in her jacket. This kind of behavior is exactly what we deal with all the time in high-end stores. Officer Harris frowned slightly, unsure of what he was dealing with. Nia didn't look like a thief. She looked terrified, but the store manager was adamant, and protocol required him to investigate further. Miss, I'm going to have to ask you to step outside with me, he said. We'll talk privately. You're not under arrest, but I need to get a clear understanding of what happened. Nia felt her throat tighten. She wanted to cry. She wanted to scream. But instead, she just nodded and followed him toward the entrance. As she walked, she heard whispers. A woman near the fitting room murmured, "What's going on?" Another responded, "Apparently that girl tried to steal something. Can't trust anyone these days." Her ears burned with humiliation. Each step toward the door felt like she was being walked into punishment for something she didn't do. Just as she reached the front of the store, her foot faltered. She turned around, trying one last time. I didn't do anything, she said, looking directly at Rachel. You never even gave me a chance. Rachel crossed her arms and said nothing. Outside, the sun was still shining, warm and bright, but everything felt cold. Officer Harris guided Nia to the curb where his patrol car was parked. He opened the back door. Please have a seat, he instructed gently. Nia hesitated. Am I in trouble? Not yet, he replied, but I need you to stay here until we figure this out. The door closed with a heavy thud, and Nia sat on the hard vinyl seat, clutching the envelope in her hands. Tears welled up in her eyes. For the first time, she allowed herself to cry. Back inside the store, Rachel walked behind the counter with a triumphant air, like a queen who had protected her castle. She didn't realize the consequences she had just set in motion. Clara watched her silently, feeling sick. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was cruelty, and she had stood by and let it happen. Across the boutique, a teenage white girl named Jenna, who had been shopping with her mother, pulled out her phone and began recording. This is wrong, she whispered. I don't know what that lady's problem is, but that girl didn't do anything. Rachel didn't notice. Outside, Nia pressed her forehead to the glass of the patrol car. She wasn't thinking about the birthday anymore. She wasn't thinking about the dress. All she could think was how fast everything had gone from exciting to terrifying. She had come here with dreams of making her mother proud, but now she was sitting in the back of a police car. And the world was watching. Inside the boutique, the air had shifted. The soft hum of polite shopping was gone, replaced by something colder. Tension, unease, a silent calculation of which side of the line each person was standing on. Some customers avoided eye contact altogether, pretending they hadn't noticed a 12-year-old girl being escorted out by police. Others exchanged quiet glances, their expressions tight with discomfort. But no one said anything. Not yet. Clara Nguyen stood stiffly behind the jewelry counter, her hands trembling as she rearranged a tray of bracelets for the third time. She kept stealing glances toward the front of the store where Rachel Monroe was adjusting her blazer, looking pleased with herself. Clara wanted to scream. Rachel had just humiliated a child, on suspicion alone. A child who had done nothing but try to buy a birthday gift. Clara had seen it all. She had heard Nia's soft voice, seen the carefully folded envelope of money, witnessed how the girl had treated every dress like it was made of crystal. But she had also seen Rachel's expression, cold, closed off, and certain. She had seen the lie being built before it was spoken aloud. A few feet away, Jenna and her mother, Lisa, stood quietly near a rack of scarves. Jenna still held her phone in her hand, the camera app open, but no longer recording. She had captured part of what had happened, though not everything. Her fingers hovered over the screen, unsure whether to post the video or keep it hidden. She was only 15, but even she could feel it in her gut. Something about what had just happened was deeply, painfully wrong. "Mom," she whispered, "she didn't do anything." Lisa frowned. "I know, but this isn't our business." Jenna looked up sharply. "That's exactly the problem. No one thinks it's their business until it happens to them." Her voice was quiet but full of something fierce. "I want to do something." Lisa didn't respond. Meanwhile, outside, Nia sat in the back of the patrol car, her head resting against the window. The warm glass pressed against her temple, but it did nothing to soothe the cold growing in her chest. She could hear the murmur of voices through the slightly cracked window. Officer Raymond Harris stood just a few feet away, speaking into his radio. "Unit 37, he said. "I have the juvenile in my vehicle, waiting on additional instructions." The reply crackled back. 10-4, what's the status?" Harris hesitated. "Unclear. Store manager says she witnessed shoplifting. No physical evidence yet. Child claims she did nothing wrong. Requesting review." His tone lacked certainty, and for good reason. In the short time he'd interacted with Nia, something hadn't added up. She was articulate, respectful, visibly shaken but not combative. She had offered to show her money, had even asked to call her mother. That was not how guilty kids behaved. Harris looked toward the store, his brow furrowed. Back inside, Clara was no longer pretending to work. She stood frozen behind the counter, watching Rachel pace like a queen who had just won a battle. Customers were whispering now, pockets of murmurs spreading across the boutique. One woman near the shoes whispered to her friend, "Did you see how the manager treated that girl? She looked terrified." Another replied, "I thought she was just shopping. She wasn't doing anything wrong." The quiet judgment in their tones was growing. Rachel heard the murmurs, but she dismissed them. She had always trusted that her authority, her presentation, and her position would shield her. In her mind, she had done what was necessary. It didn't matter what people thought, as long as she could justify it as store protocol. At that moment, Clara felt her phone vibrate in her apron pocket. It was a message from her friend Mia, another employee who worked part-time on weekends. The message read, "I just saw a video on TikTok, a girl getting arrested outside our store. Is that real?" Clara's hands went cold. It was already out there. The moment had been captured and the internet was watching. Clara stepped away from the counter and made her way to the break room. She needed a moment to breathe, to think. But as she walked past Jenna, the teenager caught her eye. Clara paused. Jenna held up her phone and whispered, "I recorded part of what happened. Do you think she really stole anything?" Clara looked at her for a long second before shaking her head. "No," she said quietly. "She didn't." Back outside, a few curious pedestrians had started to gather. A couple of them had recognized Officer Harris and were quietly asking what was going on. A local food delivery driver pulled out his phone and began filming from across the street. The scene, a young black girl sitting silently in a police car outside a boutique, was already beginning to draw attention. Nia remained quiet, her face pressed against the window, her eyes unfocused. She wasn't thinking about the money anymore. She wasn't even thinking about the dress. She was thinking about the look on Rachel's face, the absolute certainty, the disgust. She hadn't expected kindness, but she hadn't expected this either. In her pocket, her phone buzzed. She had forgotten it was there. Slowly, she pulled it out and saw the name on the screen. Mom. Tears welled up again as she pressed the message icon with trembling fingers. They're holding me outside. I didn't steal anything. Please come. She hit send, and with that, the quiet storm that had been brewing inside the boutique began to spread beyond its walls. The roar of a high-performance engine tore through the quiet afternoon, silencing even the murmurs outside the boutique. A sleek black Mercedes rolled up to the curb with precision, stopping so sharply that a few bystanders instinctively took a step back. The engine was still humming when the driver's door swung open. From behind the tinted glass emerged a woman in heels that struck the pavement like a gavel of judgment. Vanessa Dawson stepped out of the car, not like someone arriving, but like someone returning to take back what had always been hers. She wore a knee-length fitted pencil skirt that hugged her form, a tailored sky blue short-sleeve blazer, and a pair of polished nude heels. Her hair flowed in soft waves, and over her eyes were oversized designer sunglasses that did nothing to hide the power in her stride. In one hand, she clutched a minimalist black leather clutch. The other was already pulling her phone away from her ear as she barked final instructions. Her lawyer, Jordan Price, stepped out from the passenger side, sharp in a gray suit and wire-rimmed glasses, holding a slim briefcase. Vanessa's expression was unreadable, but her posture spoke volumes. This was not a mother stumbling in panic. This was a CEO on a mission. Officer Harris had just turned around when he saw her approaching. He didn't need a badge to know who she was. Every step she took seemed to part the crowd, not from fear, but from sheer authority. He straightened his stance as she came to a halt 3 feet from the patrol car. "That's my daughter," Vanessa said. Her voice was low and even, but it cut through the air like glass. "Get those handcuffs off her. Now!" Officer Harris blinked. "Ma'am, she's not under arrest. We were just waiting for backup and clarity on the situation." "Clarity?" Vanessa repeated, removing her sunglasses slowly, revealing eyes burning with fury. "You're detaining a 12-year-old girl outside of my store without evidence, without parental contact, and you're telling me you need clarity?" Jordan Price stepped forward, opening a thin folder. "Officer, my name is Jordan Price. I represent Ms. Dawson. We demand immediate release of her daughter, Nia Dawson, who has been unlawfully detained, with no charges filed and no probable cause. Additionally, we request access to security footage and statements from all parties involved, effective immediately." Officer Harris looked from Jordan to Vanessa, then back to the patrol car where Nia sat, wide-eyed, pressing her hand to the window. Her lips moved soundlessly as she stared at her mother. Harris swallowed hard. "I'll open the door," he said quietly. He stepped to the side, pulled the door handle, and helped Nia out gently. She stumbled slightly as she stood up, then rushed forward and threw herself into Vanessa's arms. Vanessa wrapped both arms around her daughter and didn't say a word. She simply held her, pressing her lips to Nia's hair, letting her know she was safe now. But her silence was not weakness. It was control. It was the deep inhale before the reckoning. Behind them, a separate car pulled up. Dr. Alana Pierce stepped out quickly, a soft leather bag slung over her shoulder. She made her way through the gathering crowd, nodded briefly to Vanessa, and knelt beside Nia, her hands already moving with practiced calm. "Sweetheart, I'm Dr. Pierce. I'm just going to check that you're okay. Is that all right?" Nia nodded through tears. Vanessa finally looked back toward the boutique, her gaze locked on the large glass windows where Rachel Monroe now stood frozen behind the counter. Their eyes met. One woman's gaze was fueled by panic, the other's by purpose. Rachel blinked as if trying to make sense of what she was seeing. She had heard the name Dawson before. It was on every shipping manifest, every brand banner, every corporate memo. But it hadn't clicked. Not until now. The woman standing outside wasn't just another angry parent. She was the owner. Vanessa turned to Officer Harris. "I want her name. I want her full report. And I want my daughter's record cleared immediately. I'm not asking." Harris nodded quickly, scribbling into his notepad. "Understood, Ms. Dawson. I'll take care of it." Dr. Pierce looked up from her brief exam. "She's shaken. Her pulse is high. She's showing signs of acute stress. I recommend immediate withdrawal from the scene and evaluation in a calmer environment." Vanessa brushed Nia's curls gently. "We'll go soon, baby. Just give me a moment." Then she turned, heels clicking like punctuation, and marched toward the boutique's entrance. Rachel was still behind the counter, her body locked in place. Clara stood nearby, pale and silent, watching everything unfold. Jenna and her mother were huddled near the racks, phones in hand, no longer pretending not to record. As Vanessa entered the store, the temperature seemed to drop. She walked with poise, precision, and a kind of presence that made even strangers straighten their backs. She stopped 10 feet from Rachel and didn't speak for a full second. Then she said, "You called the police on the owner's daughter." Rachel blinked. I didn't know. I didn't realize she—" Vanessa raised a hand. "That's exactly the problem." Rachel Monroe stood behind the counter, her hands resting tensely on the polished marble, the color draining from her face as Vanessa Dawson slowly removed her sunglasses and tucked them into her clutch. The boutique, which had moments earlier buzzed with quiet whispers, was now frozen in a stunned silence. Every eye was fixed on the woman in sky blue, the woman Rachel had just accused of raising a thief. Vanessa took one slow, deliberate step forward. "You called the police on a child, my child, without evidence, without cause, and you did so in the store that I own. Do you have any idea what you've just done?" Rachel's throat tightened. "Ms. Dawson, I wasn't aware. I didn't know she was your daughter. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to say anything," Vanessa interrupted, her voice calm but laced with steel. "She came here respectfully. She came here to buy a dress with money she earned. And you treated her like a criminal the moment she walked through the door. Not because of her behavior, not because of anything she did, but because of how she looked." Behind them, Clara Nguyen stepped out from the hallway, her hands trembling as she clutched a tablet. Her voice barely rose above a whisper, but it carried through the room like a confession. "Ms. Dawson, I have the security footage. I reviewed the last 90 minutes. Nia didn't take anything, not a single thing. She handled every item with care. She waited patiently, and she tried to explain over and over." Clara's eyes welled up with tears. "I saw it all, and I didn't say anything." Vanessa turned slowly, giving Clara a long, unreadable look. She didn't speak, just nodded once. The silence was suffocating. Rachel's fingers gripped the edge of the counter so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Jenna, standing off to the side, now bold with quiet determination, stepped forward holding her phone. "I recorded part of it. When she got taken outside, she didn't do anything. The manager just kept accusing her and wouldn't let her speak. I didn't know what else to do." Her voice cracked slightly. "She looked so scared." Lisa, Jenna's mother, touched her daughter's arm but didn't stop her. There was something happening in this room that no one could deny. The story was no longer just one person's word against another. It was unfolding before everyone's eyes. And the more that was revealed, the more undeniable the truth became. Vanessa turned back to Rachel. "Do you remember the company's mission statement, Miss Monroe? It's printed on the wall in every single boutique. Every customer deserves dignity, no matter their background, age, or appearance. You don't just work here. You work for that value. And today you broke it." Rachel's voice was shaking now. It was a mistake. I thought she was suspicious. She had a hoodie and she was alone. And I thought—" "You thought wrong," Vanessa said flatly. "You didn't see a customer. You saw a threat. And instead of investigating, instead of asking questions, you assumed the worst. That assumption has consequences." Officer Harris had stepped inside, standing by the entrance, his radio now silent. He cleared his throat gently. "Ms. Dawson, I've reviewed the initial claim, and I want to be clear. No merchandise was taken. No charges have been filed. I've already informed dispatch to mark this call as a misreport." Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "A misreport is a gentle term for a false accusation, one that could have left a child traumatized, arrested, and publicly humiliated. I hope your department has procedures in place for that." "We're conducting a review," Officer Harris replied quickly, "and I will personally include a full report of what I witnessed today. I also owe your daughter an apology." "You owe a lot more than that," Jordan Price added from behind Vanessa, "but we'll start with the footage." Rachel opened her mouth again, but Vanessa raised one hand. "Don't," she said. "Don't say you're sorry. You're not sorry for what you did. You're sorry you did it to the wrong child. You're sorry because her mother turned out to be someone who could hold you accountable. But what if I hadn't walked through that door? What if this had been someone else's daughter? Rachel's lips quivered, but she said nothing. Vanessa turned to Clara. Can you pull the footage up for the officer? I want every second reviewed and logged. Then I want a full written incident report from every employee on shift. And I want all surveillance data backed up off-site. Yes, Ms. Dawson, Clara replied quickly, already moving toward the office. Rachel suddenly stepped out from behind the counter, her face pale. Please, Ms. Dawson, I've worked here for 6 years. I've never had complaints. I've helped build this store's reputation. I didn't mean harm. I was protecting the merchandise. No, Vanessa interrupted, voice rising only slightly. You weren't protecting merchandise. You were protecting an image. One you decided didn't include little girls who looked like mine. Rachel blinked, stunned. Vanessa continued. This store doesn't need protection from customers like Nia. It needs protection from employees like you. And with that, she turned to Jordan and said simply, draw up the termination paperwork. Rachel sank into the nearest chair, her world collapsing not with a scream, but with silence. Vanessa Dawson stood tall in the center of the boutique, the store now transformed from a quiet, upscale showroom into a public courtroom. The walls that once displayed gowns and handbags now bore witness to a reckoning that had been long overdue. Word of the incident had already begun to spread beyond these glass walls. Phones were still recording. Camera flashes blinked from the sidewalk outside. A small crowd had gathered, murmuring, debating, watching history happen in real time. Officer Harris remained near the entrance, jaw clenched, radio quiet. He was no longer in control of the situation, and he knew it. Every movement, every word he had spoken was now part of a record that might cost him his badge. He avoided Vanessa's eyes. He didn't deserve to look her in the face. Rachel Monroe remained seated on the velvet stool beside the cashier counter, staring at the floor. Her breath came shallow. The confident poise she had carried just an hour earlier had vanished completely. The illusion of power shattered. Vanessa turned slowly toward Clara Nguyen, who stood near the back office door, with tears drying on her cheeks. Clara took a deep breath and finally spoke with clarity and conviction. I want to say this on the record. I witnessed everything. I was afraid to speak earlier, but I can't stay silent anymore. Rachel mistreated Nia from the moment she walked in. She refused to greet her, hovered behind her, made passive-aggressive comments, and ignored her attempts to communicate. She never once offered help. And then she lied to the officer about theft. There was never any theft. Jenna, the teen with the phone, stepped forward. I saw it too. She was so calm, so careful. She had money. She wasn't doing anything wrong. I don't think she even touched more than a few dresses. But the manager, she treated her like she was dangerous just because she was by herself and wearing a hoodie. Vanessa nodded once in gratitude. She wasn't here for applause. She was here for change. She turned back toward the crowd now building outside the storefront. Local news vans had begun arriving, antennas raised, cameras mounted. One reporter had already positioned herself near the sidewalk, mic in hand, narrating to a live feed. Behind her, signs were being raised by passers-by who had heard what happened. Some scrawled in Sharpie on paper, others displayed through digital overlays on social media videos. Inside, Vanessa reached into her clutch and pulled out a small folded document. She passed it to Jordan, her lawyer, who adjusted his glasses and opened it. This, he announced, is an emergency motion being submitted to the Board of Directors of Essence Mode to suspend store operations at this location pending a full review. Furthermore, a formal complaint will be filed with the Civil Rights Division regarding racial profiling, wrongful detainment of a minor, and negligent handling of customer discrimination by store personnel. Rachel's mouth opened slightly, but no words came. Vanessa looked toward Officer Harris again, her tone firm. Officer, I expect an official apology to be filed in writing, not just to my daughter, but to every child of color who's ever been humiliated because someone saw them as less than human. He nodded slowly, ashamed. Yes, ma'am, it will be done. Vanessa then turned toward Clara and Jenna. Both of you did something brave today. You spoke when it counted. That doesn't undo the pain my daughter felt, but it proves there's still good people willing to stand up. Jenna's voice wavered. I just didn't want her to be alone. Vanessa smiled gently, but her eyes remained fierce. She wasn't. Not anymore. Suddenly, the boutique's front doors opened again. A second police cruiser pulled up, this time not to arrest, but to observe. Chief Lorna Willis, a tall black woman in her 50s, with silver-streaked braids and the presence of command in every movement, stepped out. She had served the city for over 20 years and had a long-standing professional relationship with Vanessa Dawson. Ms. Dawson, Chief Willis said as she approached, I came as soon as I heard. I'm deeply sorry. We're going to investigate this thoroughly. There will be accountability. Thank you, Chief, Vanessa replied, her voice softening only slightly. I trust you'll do what's right. Inside the store, Dr. Alana Pierce gently guided Nia to a quieter seating area near the back. The girl had stopped crying, but sat quietly, her expression blank. Alana crouched beside her and held her hand. You were so brave today, Nia. You didn't raise your voice. You didn't panic. You told the truth, and everyone saw it. Nia looked up slowly. I just wanted to get my mom something special, something she'd be proud of. Dr. Pierce smiled. She's already proud of you, more than you know. Vanessa walked over to them, kneeling beside her daughter. She brushed a curl from Nia's forehead and whispered, Baby girl, I am so sorry you went through this. You did nothing wrong, and because of you, things are going to change. Outside, the crowd had grown to over 50 people. Some held signs that read, Let her shop in peace, Justice for Nia, and this could be my child. The boutique's windows had become a mirror for the city's conscience. Back inside, Vanessa rose to her feet and addressed everyone. Staff, customers, police officers, and onlookers alike. Her voice was steady, measured, and clear. We are done accepting apologies with no action. This was not a misunderstanding. It was a manifestation of a system that assumes guilt before grace, threat before thought, and bias before facts. My daughter was criminalized for shopping, for existing. That is unacceptable. And today, it ends. The room held its breath. Then, like the break in a storm, came the applause. Not thunderous, not performative, but real, heavy with emotion, laden with meaning. Vanessa didn't smile. She had more to do. By the time Vanessa Dawson and her daughter exited the boutique, the street had transformed into a sea of attention. Local reporters had assembled in front of velvet ropes, hastily set up by the responding officers. Cameramen adjusted their lenses. Passers-by whispered as they paused to capture the moment. Some held their phones high, broadcasting live to thousands. A hashtag had already emerged online. 3 words that carried the weight of a storm. Let her shop. Vanessa held Nia's hand tightly as they descended the stone steps. Nia walked slowly, the overwhelming buzz around her only adding to her exhaustion. She clutched the envelope of money, now slightly crumpled, in her other hand. Though her face remained composed, Vanessa could feel the tremor in her daughter's grip. It was the silent aftershock of public trauma, the kind that doesn't show up on police reports but lives in the bloodstream for years. At the curb, Jordan Price opened the rear door of the Mercedes. Vanessa helped Nia inside first, pausing to adjust the seatbelt across her lap with deliberate care. Then she turned back to face the cameras. Her heels clicked once on the pavement. Sharp, final, declarative. She didn't need a podium. Her presence was enough. I want to make this very clear, Vanessa began, her voice carrying effortlessly across the crowd. What happened today wasn't about policy. It wasn't about theft. It wasn't even about merchandise. What happened today was a choice made by a person in power to judge a child by her appearance. That choice could have led to my daughter's arrest, her criminal record, her lifelong fear of public spaces. That choice will never be acceptable. Not in my store, not in my company, not in my city. Cameras snapped in succession. Reporters jotted notes. Some even stopped filming for a moment, just to listen. This company, Vanessa continued, was built on a belief that fashion is for everyone. That self-expression should be met with encouragement, not suspicion. We failed that belief today. And as CEO of Essence Mode, I take responsibility, not for what my employee did, but for what I must now correct. She pulled a folded document from her clutch and held it up. Effective immediately, we are launching the Equal Grace Initiative. This is a company-wide reform effort that includes mandatory anti-bias training, community review boards, and a formal customer dignity code posted in every store. And we are establishing a permanent department of equity experience within our leadership team, with a direct reporting line to me. There was a brief murmur through the crowd. It wasn't just the passion behind her words. It was the clarity of her plan. And this, she added, unfolding a second document, is a new fund, the Brightway Fellowship, a $10 million commitment to support youth who experience discrimination in public spaces. The fund will provide mental health services, advocacy, legal resources, and mentorship. It begins today, and it is named not after my daughter, but after the idea that no child should ever have to dim their light to fit into someone else's expectation. Jordan nodded beside her, clearly moved. A few reporters lowered their cameras altogether. Vanessa turned slightly, her gaze falling on the boutique behind her. That store will close temporarily, not because of damage, but because it must be healed. The brand will return, but only once I am satisfied that no customer will ever again feel unwelcome in a space designed to uplift. From the crowd, spontaneous applause erupted, first scattered, then swelling. It was not the applause of spectacle, but of solidarity. Even strangers who hadn't witnessed the incident directly could feel that something had shifted. This was more than corporate damage control. This was a mother wielding power with precision and purpose. Inside the Mercedes, Nia leaned her head against the window and watched the crowd. Her heartbeat still thudded unevenly, but she noticed something that sparked a quiet pride. Some of the people weren't just there to record, they were defending her. Signs waved with her name on them. Someone had drawn a sketch of a hoodie and wrote, "Not a threat." Others had simply written, "She belongs." Vanessa climbed into the front seat beside Jordan and pulled the door closed. The car eased away from the curb as police continued managing the sidewalk. News crews began filming recaps. Posts flooded online. In less than 20 minutes, the story had trended nationally. A still frame of Vanessa holding Nia's hand was now the lead image on every platform. Captioned simply, "This is what leadership looks like." At the Essence Mode headquarters across town, Patricia Green, Vanessa's longtime executive assistant, was already coordinating the first wave of corporate messaging. Emails had gone out to all store managers. Emergency all-hands meetings were being scheduled. HR was preparing new training rollouts. But Patricia wasn't thinking about logistics. She was thinking about the girl in the pink hoodie. She walked over to Vanessa's office and placed a printed photo on the desk, still from Clara's security footage. Nia standing tall in front of the counter, envelope in hand. Her eyes uncertain but her body steady. Across the bottom of the image, Patricia had scrawled 5 words in pen. She stood. So we follow. 2 weeks had passed since the day the boutique became a battleground for dignity. The city had moved on in some ways. News cycles had shifted. New headlines had risen. But for Vanessa Dawson, and especially for Nia, nothing had returned to normal. Healing was never instantaneous. It was deliberate, layered, and most of all, personal. Inside their home, Vanessa walked through the hallway toward Nia's room. She carried a tray with tea, a bowl of sliced fruit, and a hardcover book titled, "When You Speak, You Rise." Outside the bedroom door, she paused for a moment listening. It was quiet, but not in a way that worried her. It was the quiet of someone deep in thought. She knocked gently. "Sweetheart, can I come in?" Nia's voice was soft. "Yeah, Mom." The door opened to reveal a room transformed not by decor, but by spirit. On the desk, a small bouquet of letters sat in a clear vase. Handwritten notes from classmates, neighbors, and even strangers. Messages like, "You inspired me, I believe you, and you reminded me to be brave," filled the pages. One note came from a girl in Michigan who had also been falsely accused of shoplifting and had never spoken about it, until she saw Nia's story. Vanessa placed the tray on the nightstand and sat beside her daughter. "How are you feeling today?" Nia shrugged. "Better. Still weird, though. Sometimes I feel proud, and sometimes I just feel tired." Vanessa nodded. "That's okay. You don't have to feel just one thing. You survived something painful, and now you're healing. That takes energy and time. They sat in silence for a moment before Nia asked, "Do I have to go to the ceremony tonight?" Vanessa smiled softly. "You don't have to, but I think you'll want to." Upon. The ceremony scheduled for that evening at Essence Mode's headquarters wasn't just a publicity event. It was a formal acknowledgement, an internal restructuring launch in the public announcement of the Brightway Fellowship. More importantly, it was a celebration of resilience. Nia was the guest of honor, even though the fellowship bore no one's name. It was about an idea, a truth, that everyone deserves space, dignity, and peace, even while doing something as ordinary as shopping. Hours later, the event hall inside the glass-paneled building shimmered with light. Chandeliers glistened overhead. Rows of seats lined the room, filled with community leaders, civil rights advocates, educators, corporate partners, and press. There was no red carpet, no celebrity endorsements, just a quiet, resolute energy that told everyone in attendance they were part of something that mattered. At the center of it all was Nia, wearing a cream-colored dress her mother had tailored for her. A simple yet elegant design with soft pleats and silver buttons. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't meant to make a statement, but it did. The girl who had once been escorted from her own mother's store in handcuffs was now standing on stage under a banner that read, "Brightway begins here." Vanessa took the podium first. She wore the same sky blue blazer from the boutique incident, not out of coincidence but intention. A reminder, a thread. 2 weeks ago, she began, my daughter faced one of the oldest evils in this country, assumption based on skin. That experience could have broken her, could have broken me, but it didn't. Because when we are hurt, we do not have to pass that pain forward. We can choose to transform it into something meaningful. The audience listened in rapt attention. Vanessa continued, "The Brightway Fellowship is not just a program. It is a promise. A promise that no young person will stand alone when judged unfairly, that they will have support, resources, and a voice behind them. A fellowship is about community, and community begins with courage." She then turned to Nia and extended a hand. "Tonight, I want to introduce someone whose quiet strength moved hearts across this nation. Someone who didn't scream or shout, but stood still and true. My daughter, Nia Dawson." A wave of applause rose, not theatrical, but deeply sincere. Nia approached the podium slowly, her mother beside her. She cleared her throat, adjusted the microphone, and spoke into it for the first time. "I didn't know that buying a dress could become a story. I just wanted to make my mom happy. But when someone told me I didn't belong, I didn't know what to do. I still don't have all the answers. But I know this. I don't want anyone else to feel the way I felt that day." She looked out across the crowd. "I'm not brave because I wanted to be. I'm brave because I had no other choice. And because my mom told me that being quiet doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means you're waiting for the right moment to be heard." Vanessa felt her eyes well with tears. So did dozens of others. Nia concluded, "Thank you for listening to me, and for giving other kids a chance to be heard too." The applause this time lasted a full minute. Some people stood, others wiped their eyes. And in that moment, no one saw a victim. They saw a light. The day after the Brightway Fellowship ceremony, the photo of Nia Dawson standing at the podium had become an emblem. It was shared in classrooms, reposted by civil rights groups, and even displayed in a digital mural across a downtown billboard. In the image, Nia wasn't smiling broadly or posing like a star. She was just standing, still, sincere, strong. That was the power of it. She didn't have to perform to be honored. She only had to exist truthfully. In the days that followed, Essence Mode's stores began to change. Customer dignity policies were placed near entrances, printed not in fine print, but in bold, easy-to-read language. Every employee received a handbook titled Presence with Purpose, with training that included simulations, self-reflection sessions, and mandatory service in community youth centers. Store managers who failed to complete the training within 30 days were quietly replaced. Rachel Monroe's name was never mentioned publicly again, but internally the incident that led to her dismissal was referenced in every training session as the lesson at 5th Street. Beyond retail, the ripple reached policy. A coalition of mayors from 3 major cities, including Vanessa's hometown, began discussions about a Customer Civil Rights Act, a local policy measure focused on preventing racial profiling in commercial establishments. The initiative gained traction fast. Business owners from tech to food service began signing on, pledging to train their staff in bias awareness and non-discriminatory service practices. But amid all the noise, all the headlines, all the momentum, the part that mattered most remained quiet. It was Sunday morning, 1 month after the incident, and Vanessa and Nia were at their favorite cafe near the park. The staff knew them by name and had already prepared their usual table by the window. Vanessa sipped from her coffee cup, glancing over at Nia, who was sketching something on a notepad with colored pencils. "What are you drawing today?" Vanessa asked. Nia turned the notebook around slowly. It showed a row of storefronts, but not just any stores. Each had signs above the doors that said, "All welcome," "Grace first," and "Belonging begins here." There were kids of all races in front of them, smiling, carrying shopping bags. A few were hugging their moms. Vanessa smiled. "That's beautiful. Is this for school?" Nia shook her head. "No, I just wanted to draw what the world should look like." Vanessa's heart tightened. There was something about the simplicity of the drawing, the hope of it, that made everything worth it. That afternoon, they drove to the reopening of the 5th Street boutique. It had undergone a complete interior renovation. The layout was brighter, more inclusive, with expanded youth sections and a diversity-themed art wall featuring portraits submitted by young artists around the city. The most prominent painting in the center showed a young girl in a pastel pink hoodie, standing with her arms gently open. Underneath, a simple line of text: "Courage doesn't shout, it shines." As Vanessa and Nia entered the store, they were greeted by Clara Nguyen, now officially promoted to store director. She wore a smile of pride and humility as she approached them. "Mrs. Dawson, Nia, welcome home." Vanessa nodded. "Thank you, Clara. I'm proud of what you've done here." "It's just the beginning," Clara replied. "There's still more to fix, but we're committed now, all of us." Vanessa walked with Nia past the newly rearranged aisles, past other mothers and daughters browsing without fear. A young black girl about Nia's age approached timidly. Her name tag read Avery, intern. She looked up at Nia with wide eyes and whispered, "You're the girl from the video, right?" Nia nodded slowly. "Yeah, I guess I am." Avery smiled. "You helped my mom decide not to pull me out of school. After what happened to you, she started speaking up at work too. She says you reminded her not to be afraid anymore." Nia didn't know how to respond, so she just offered a quiet, "Thank you." They walked on. As they approached the checkout counter, a new display caught Vanessa's eye. It was a small stand titled The Brightway Journal, a monthly publication curated by young writers, thinkers, and artists, sponsored through the fellowship. The first issue featured an article titled How to Speak Up Without Shouting, written by Nia herself. She hadn't told her mother it was being published yet. Vanessa picked it up and blinked in surprise. Nia blushed. "I didn't think you'd see it this fast." Vanessa pulled her into a hug. "You're helping people heal in ways I never imagined." Outside the store, another gathering was forming, but this time, it wasn't to protest. It was a launch party for a new citywide youth leadership initiative co-sponsored by the Brightway Fellowship. Vanessa had been asked to give opening remarks, but she declined. She handed the microphone to someone better suited. Nia. As the sun began to set, casting golden rays across the crowd, Nia stepped forward. She was taller than before, not physically but in presence. She looked out over the gathering, took a breath, and said, "I thought I was just a kid who wanted to buy a dress. But I guess sometimes one small moment becomes something big. I hope that wherever you are, you remember this. Your voice matters, even if it shakes." And for the second time in a month, a wave of quiet applause washed over a city ready to listen. Not to noise, but to truth. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of the quiet strength that lives in every child, then we invite you to reflect, to share, and to speak up. Because change does not always begin with noise. It begins with truth, with courage, and with people like you who refuse to look away. You've been watching Jack's Stories, where every moment of injustice becomes a lesson, and every voice deserves to be heard. Tell us in the comments, have you or someone you love ever been judged unfairly just because of how you looked? How would you respond if you were Nia or her mother? We're listening, and we'll be back soon with another story that reveals what happens when dignity is denied, then reclaimed.